Hey, it's Jen Mack, Lady of the Mind. Welcome to Life Mastery Decoded, where I help you decode the struggles in your life in the areas of health, wealth, relationships, and spirituality with mind mastery, emotional management, and meditation. Welcome to today's podcast. Hey, ladies, it's Jen Mack, Lady of the Mind. Welcome to today's episode where I hope I am finding you completely healed from your past pain and trauma. If you are not completely healed from your past pain and trauma, then please allow me to give you one nugget of inspiration towards your transformation in today's podcast. When we talk about past pain and past trauma, those issues, those circumstances, situations, stories that have happened to us that were out of our control may haunt us forever if we continue to feed that trauma. First of all, let me tell you right now, you are not your pain. You went through a painful experience. You went through a traumatic experience. You are not your pain. You are not the abuse. You are not the punching bag of somebody else. You are a living, breathing human being on this planet who deserves love and joy and complete and total healing. And in order for us to get healing, we have to move to a space of healing. We have to bring our energy up. I think almost every single person I've ever come into contact with has had some story from their past that haunts them in their adult days. And if you're listening to this, you have one or two or several stories where something was not in your favor. Something happened. Someone did something to you that haunts you today. So I'm going to give you some simple steps, some simple techniques. I have used every single one of these techniques to free myself of any past pain, any past trauma, and I continue to do so. I continue to meet with my coach and I continue to learn new tools and techniques to then deliver myself basically to freedom, because I want to be free of this baggage and this heavy, heavy, traumatic energy. So the things that I am about to teach you today, I have done, I have worked through, and I am free of most of the, well, certainly all of the big traumatic events that have happened in my life as a young girl. And I hope that you can listen through the whole recording today to get to these very powerful tools. The very first thing, I'm going to give you a couple different episodes that will go a little bit deeper into this tool, but the very first one is forgiveness. Now, before you press stop and vow to never listen to my podcast again, I want you to listen to this whole thing. When I talk about forgiveness, I want you to understand specifically and wholeheartedly, it is not about you saying you're okay with what happened. I'm not even asking you to understand what happened because, frankly, between you and I don't know that I care. I want to be rid of the pain. I don't care why they did it. I don't want to be in therapy for 30 years going over the story over and over again to try to understand their perspective. All I care about as far as this trauma goes is my feeling, my freedom from it. I have a past client that has suffered physical abuse, sexual abuse by the hand of her stepfather and several of her mom's boyfriends, and lives to this day as an adult punishing herself over and over and over again based on this trauma. Continues to this day as an adult to punish herself based on that trauma. And as a matter of fact, her stepfather is no longer living and she continues to punish herself. And I say that to you because you may be experiencing something similar, where it's this self-loathing, self-punishing, that something is wrong with you that led to this trauma. First of all, let me tell you, nothing is wrong with you. A traumatic event took place in your life, and that is not on you. It is not your fault. You didn't do anything that led to this trauma. This is a story in your past that was a traumatic event. If we can begin at this moment to disassociate, to not identify with the incident or incidents, to not say, I am this, I am suffering, I am someone who has been abused, is to take it and separate the incident from who you are. If you're still listening to this, that means you are looking for healing. And when I talk about forgiveness, it is never to say, ever, for you to get to a point that says, what happened to me, what this person did to me is okay, I'm okay with it. That is not what forgiveness is. Let me tell you what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is a release of the energy that drags you down. It's a release of the energy that is stuck in your energy system that allows you to continue to feel this negative emotion regarding the trauma. It's to release that, the heaviness that you feel. None of it is to say, let that person back into your life, or let that person continue to abuse you, or you should just be okay with whatever that person did to you. None of that is what I'm saying. It is all about you. It's about you healing from the past. Take this as an example. Let's say your best friend walks up to you and punches you in the arm, leaving a bruise. And then you get in a fight with that best friend because it hurt and that was terrible. And you thought you were friends and she was really angry and she punched you in the arm. Now you go home and you have a bruise. What do? Do you continue to poke the bruise to continue to leave it there? Do you continue to poke the bruise to remind you of the pain and poke the bruise and say, well, I'm not a good friend anyway. I deserve to be punched. I deserve this bruise. And I'm going to continue to poke and push at this bruise for the remainder of my life. Seems ridiculous, doesn't it? But with the energy that's in our system regarding this traumatic event, that is what we're doing. We're continuing to keep that energy there by continuing to push that bruise. And as we continue to push that bruise to keep it there in our energy body, we continue to talk about it. Talk about the story, try to understand their perspective, try to understand why it happened, things that you can do to work through the trauma. As you're poking the bruise, does it feel good when you talk about the story? Now, you shouldn't feel good, but does it still resonate with you? Does it still bring up negative emotions? Do you still feel sad, discouraged, frustrated, anger, rage, this confusion, like, why did this happen? If you're still feeling those emotions when you think about the incident or incidents, then you are still pushing the bruise, just where you are right now. Maybe this is an incident you haven't talked about in a long time. Maybe it's not something that you post all over Facebook and you talk about and you try to keep yourself in that energy, the momentum of the trauma. So very first thing is disassociate with the trauma. You are not the traumatic event. A traumatic event happened to you. If you can get to there, you're well on your way. Everything else is just some techniques. But if you can disassociate to say, you know what, I was a little girl or a little boy and this thing happened to me and I am not my trauma. I experienced trauma. I have the energy of that trauma still in my system. There's the bruise. It's this energy bruise. So the next is to forgive. Now, this forgiveness process, I'll give you a couple different podcasts to listen to. And the one that goes through a really powerful technique is season 3, episode 16, Forgiveness is for you, not them. When I talk about forgiveness, it was really hard. You know, this one particular traumatic event happened to me when I was probably 11 or 12. And it was very traumatic and it changed my entire outlook towards this person. My entire outlook, my entire relationship, my entire trust was completely wiped away by this one incident forever. And I kept going into trying to heal from this and finding and researching and reading books and asking this question. And it was really interesting because the very first thing was to forgive. And I'm like, screw that. I ain't forgiving him. I'm not forgiving him for what he did to me. And I would shut the book and walk away, and it would stay buried for, another 2, 3 years, whatever. And I would come up again. Forgiveness, man, damn it. I don't want to forgive anybody. Well, once it finally came up, probably the 23rd time, I'm like, okay, I need to look into this because it's affecting my other relationships. So I need to look into this. I need to dive into this. I need to understand why this message keeps coming up to me. When I looked into forgiveness and I began this spiritual journey of energy work, and I looked at forgiveness and I said, you know what? I understand now because I'm the one that's carrying around the bruise. And I'm not saying that what he did was okay, because it's not. It's not okay. And I will never agree with it. Never. And I don't want to hear his perspective anymore because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that I'm not carrying this around anymore. I am on the journey to cleaning up my energy from past experiences, traumatic, negative experiences that are still housed in my system, that are preventing me from living a successful life, from loving somebody openly, for trusting others, allowing people deeper into being able to connect with me. It's preventing me. And in that prevention, that's where it's hurting me because of what happened. If I let that go, now my life can continue moving. It's kind of like you're sliding along and then you come to this dry patch. You're like, I can't get further. I can't go any further. I'm stuck right here. Clean up that energy, clean up that dry patch, and you get to start gliding again. And that's what I'm talking about. Forgiveness is about releasing the energy. You don't have to let the person back into your life. You don't have to even talk to the other person. It's not about writing them a letter, though you can do that too. But it's about you healing from that experience. That's it. So I've given you a couple of podcasts and I've given you a couple of ideas, the forgiveness and the disassociating from the traumatic event. The next is also very, very powerful. Well, and as there's forgiveness, there's lots of different tools and techniques, but one of the things is to go in and find that energy and feel it. So when you tell yourself the story and you talk about this traumatic event, is to find out where it shows up in your body and then be willing to release it. Feel all the way through it. Feel the shame, feel the guilt, feel the anger, the rage. Feel into that emotion and be willing to release it. And then I'm going to ask, the next part is to recreate the story. And you're like, well, wait, Jen, it did happen. Yes, it did. It did happen on a certain timeline in space and time when you were however old this traumatic event took place. So I understand. But in order to release the energy fully and to recreate new emotions, we can recreate the story. This is how powerful and how absolutely helpful and healing our imagination can be. And it's a beautiful thing. I have recreated several stories in my past. And I look at those stories and I say, okay, this thing happened and it creates this negative, it creates this negative response in my body. When I recreate, I de-energize it, which is the releasing of the energy. I forgive the situation. So I've released and removed the energy. Then on the step 2 is I've recreated a new story on a different timeline. We have to understand that space and time is not as finite as we think. It's not this linear space. It is different timelines. I'm not going to go into all of what that means, but trust me. So now I take this scenario. I've de-energized. I've released. I've focused. I've forgiven anybody that was involved or needed to be forgiven, and just to let go of the energy on my end. Then I've said, okay, so here's the story. Here's the emotions, release the emotion. Now I can tell the story without any negative reaction. I can tell the story without getting tears or getting angry. Now I know that I've released the energy, okay? Now as I've released the energy of the story, I'm now at a neutral place. And that neutral place allows me to do I want to continue to belabor this trauma? Or do I want to recreate a new story? Well, I found this technique to be really interesting, but also really, I was very curious to see how this was going to work. And so when I was going through a coaching program and this technique was brought to me, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. I'm going to bring up a couple of things that were pretty painful, and I'm going to recreate the story. So now, because it was so powerful, I can tell 2 different stories about the event. But The best part is one of them feels better to tell than the other. So story A is about this event that happened, and it made me very angry, and I could hardly talk about it without crying. I de-energized it and I let it go, and I forgave the people that were involved. So now I can tell that story and it'd be neutral. I have no emotion. It's just like I just said a cat crossed the street and caught a bird at the bird feeder. It's just a very neutral story where it used to be highly triggered. Now what I did was I recreated a new story and I filled it with new empowering emotion. So now when I tell the story, I can tell this new story and I can feel better about it. Because everything is energy. And as you are starting to explore and move along on your spiritual journey and you start to recognize everything is energy, and the things that don't feel good you can let go of. And the way you want to feel you can bring into your life. And then you're probably saying, well, Jen, but then that's not really my life if I'm making up all of these stories. It is not your life in the past. So you have a choice. You can continue to tell stories from your past that create negative triggers. Those triggers go along with you forever and ever and ever and ever and ever until you die. What I'm saying is, do you want to heal from that? Do you want to let some of those stories go? It's not changing who you are as a person. It's releasing you from your past trauma. It is healing the bruise, the energetic bruise that you continue to have as a person on this planet. Are you starting to feel pain in your body as you're getting older? Back, knees, hips, feet? Are you starting to get up in the morning and you're stiff? That is not from age. That is not simply because you're getting older. It's because you're carrying the weight of these past negative events in your energy body. And now because they go on and on and on and on, you are becoming more physically pained because of it. You're continuing to carry this negative energy, and now it is affecting you years later in your body, and you're feeling it, and you're physically feeling it. That is a process of manifesting. We don't go through abuse as young people and then continue to feel that emotional pain right away. We do, there's fear and there's shame and there's anger and frustration, but as we're little, we're processing it different. Then we say, well, I got rid of it. I'm 34 years old now and I don't have it anymore. And I'm going to say I beg to differ unless you've done some work on it and you can talk about it without being triggered. And if you can talk about it without being triggered, then I think that's amazing. And then now what's the new story? I think that as we go on this journey, it's really important to be releasing of those things that bring us down. Your body is going to now become a cleaner vessel, lighter, freer, more joyful. You're going to be able to reach those higher frequencies in your vibration with ease. So as you recreate the scene, is you're going to ask yourself, so here's this traumatic event. Here's the scene. And it was awful. And what is it in that scene that you needed and you didn't get? Love, safety, trust, clarity. What didn't you get? And then recreate that with the new story. You're going to add that emotion into the story. It's this amazing technique because at the end of the day, I can talk about my path with dating these girls that were awful. They were awful. And the relationships were terrible and tremendously unhealthy. But because I took time to recreate that whole timeline, which was probably from 1990 to 2010, 2012, 1992 to 2022. So what is that, 30 years? Was that 40 years? I don't know how many years that is. So what I did in recreating that timeline, 30 years, I recreated that timeline. So now I can talk about that entire 30-year process where a whole bunch of holy moly happened. And well, certainly within that 20 years, so 2012, within that 20 years, my life was quite tumultuous. My life was there was lots of crap that happened, let's say. And during that time, because I've recreated that entire timeline, I now have a better story. even if I don't tell it to anybody. But energetically, I am free from it. So as we recreate the story, you're going to ask yourself, what is it that I needed that I didn't get? And if it's some sort of physical abuse or sexual abuse, maybe it's safety. Safety and comfort, let's say. And what I didn't get was safety and comfort or trust. Okay? So you're going to recreate the story. What did you want to have happen instead? What would you have wanted to have happen instead? Now, if you can't even talk about it or think about it, then you're still in the story of the trauma. So you need to continue to work through and let that energy go. Continue to work through the forgiveness process, feeling those emotions and releasing them. Then you get to create a new story. So here's my new story. And it should be exciting. Anytime that I've ever created new stories, it was exciting. When it gets to be there, now you know you have let go of all of the other emotions that have gone with the trauma. And when you have let go of any of the other emotions that have gone with the trauma, it now moves into this more positive state. You start from this neutral position, it moves into this positive state, and you feel amazing and creative to create a new story around that trauma. Then after you create this new story, is now to ask yourself, where in my life am I suffering from this trauma? Let's say it's trust. Well, I can't trust my person. I can't trust my mate, my husband, my boyfriend, my kids, my boss, anybody. I have trust issues based on this trauma. So now, once you've created the new story, is you can say, how can I add more self-trust or trust in my life now that I've recreated the story? And I'll tell you right now, you won't have any problems. If you do this process correctly and you do it all the way through, you will not have any problems bringing trust into your life. It's just going to, because the energy is gone, you were guarded, and now you've broken down that wall. So you have this wide open space, this new canvas, if you will, to recreate your life going forward because you've let go of this anchor that was holding you back. You're going to feel more joy. You're going to feel freer, lighter, healthier, and your relationships are just going to deepen. Now, again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that your relationship with that particular person is going to get deeper. I did that 20 years of recreating a timeline. And in that 20 years, there were several girlfriends that were these unhealthy relationships. When I recreated that, get to the end and where I am today, I did not go back and recreate relationships with those girls on any kind of level. I didn't reach out to them and write them a letter and send them a message on Facebook or anything. I didn't welcome them back into my life with open arms. They're still not in my life. All I did was let go of the relationship. I just forgave the things that happened. I let go of that energy and that trauma. That's all I did. Now I'm freer in my current life at this current timeline with Amy, the boys, my family, to take those relationships to a deeper level because I couldn't do it before. So the end result is I feel better. I feel excited when I talk about my past instead of this dark doom and gloom. I feel lighter and healthier and freer from that energy, which means now, today, my relationships have gone deeper. So I'm going to continue this work, and I hope that you will continue this work, and I hope that you will continue to put yourself in places of self-care and self-love. You will continue to love yourself through this process. I'm going to give you another podcast number that is Self-Care is Not Selfish. And let me look and I'm going to get the number for you. It is season 3, episode 33. Self-Care is Not Selfish. If you are struggling with self-care, especially through thinking about traumatic events, I want you to go back and listen to that podcast to be able to add more self-care and self-love into your life and to understand fully what that means. And that is a good podcast to listen to. The other is to just be gentle with yourself as you go through this process. It is not easy to bring up past traumatic events and deal with them immediately. I do hope that you begin this process, at least be open. If you're still listening, you're still open, and be curious about how your life can improve and your relationships can go deeper after you've done this process. And if you need some support, then please allow me to support you. Join our Lady Rising Facebook community. It's a sister circle community of women helping women. That is my mission, is for me to empower women through communities, connection, and calls to help support one another on their spiritual journey. These are all women all across the globe. We have calls monthly, and we are advancing in our communication and our communities to be able to support each other through these emotional turmoil events that we are trying to release. So I hope that if you need some support, you need a community, we are here for you. This is what we're doing. If this is something that you're interested in, go to Facebook, go to Lady Rising. In the membership question, say you got this information from listening to one of my podcasts, and you'll be welcomed with open arms into this community of women to help support you on this journey. If you liked this episode and look forward to future episodes, please consider making a small monthly donation to help support this podcast. If you are looking for a community to join and have more access to me, then consider one of the following platforms. Chakras for Beginners is an energy-based community that is highly active and growing every day. Lady Rising is a sistership community where the focus is on spiritual support and connection. We hold monthly calls and talk about topics such as today's episode. We also have an online store where you can meet your meditation and chakra needs with products for your journey. You can visit us at www.themeditationroomtc.com. Thank you for joining me and being a valued listener.